Well, welcome to our second week of what we've called More Than Just a Fortune Cookie, a series that we based on the Old Testament book of Proverbs. And I'm glad that you're here, glad that you're going to participate in that. We welcome our Sapulpa campus and maybe folks that are listening on the internet as well. If you were here last week, you got the main point, I hope. The main point was this, that you and I would get the most out of life by trusting the Creator of life. I think that's part of the reason that Proverbs was written, was so that you and I would get the most out of life by trusting the Creator of life, trusting the wisdom that the Creator of life gives. And that would be my wish for you as we go through this book of Proverbs over the next few weeks, that you would explore, that you would investigate, that you would look into this wisdom that God gives us, and it very well improve your life. God gives us this wisdom. He's the one that created life, and so He knows it best. He knows what's best for us, and when we listen and follow to God's wisdom, then I think generally we are going to experience the best of life. Now, we began by talking about what Proverbs are not. Let me just remind you, they are not just cute, clever sayings. Let me remind you that Proverbs are not promises of God. These are specific literary devices that, when it comes down to it, really what Proverbs are general principles of life. These are things that generally happen. These are things that are generally true, but you cannot take them as this saith the Lord. This is what God promises, because that's not what they are. And so we're going to talk this morning and explore this idea of what God has to say to us about finances. And I'm going to ask your help on this one. I need your help on this sermon, and I'm going to have you kind of say along several verses with me, because I think these Proverbs we're going to look at today are so important. I want you to go through the process of just verbalizing them out loud with me, okay? So we're going to have them pop up on the screen. It's probably not even practical for you to open your Bible today. You're certainly welcome to do that, but we're going to have lots of this on the screen, and there is lots on finances when you look into Proverbs. I mean, there's just tons of great wisdom when you look at this. And so I'm going to have you kind of follow along with me as we do this. First thing I want us to understand from Proverbs, and I've got a blank for you to fill in there, is this, that money can be a useful tool. Money can be a useful tool. In fact, I want you to say Proverbs 10:16 with me. It says, "The earnings of the godly enhance their lives." Some of you would recognize that is entirely true. Money can be a tool. It can be a good thing. It can bless other people. It can help you. It can help you to have a more comfortable life. It can cause you to be able to provide for your future. There are just good things that money can be used for. But Proverbs also, on the other hand, says this, that money can be a dangerous addiction. It can be a useful tool, but if it gets used wrongly, if it turns into a love and a pursuit of money, then it can be a dangerous addiction. Say with me Proverbs 1:19. "Such is the fate of all who are greedy for money. It robs them of life." You may very well know someone who has been greedy for money, whose life's pursuit has been that of money and acquiring stuff, and you've looked at them and said, that person has been robbed of life. They are so driven in that regard that they have lost sight of what life is about. And God warns us, God's Word warns us about being a lover of money, because it can take the throne of our life. It can take God's place in our life and keep us from following Him wholeheartedly. Now, Proverbs tells us that money needs to be kept in its place. That, in fact, there are lots of things, though it's a great tool, though it's something that can be used for a lot of good, it tells us that money needs to be kept in the right perspective. In fact, as I was reading through the book of Proverbs, and I've read it through multiple times as we've been preparing for this over the last few months, there are several things that Proverbs make sure we understand are of higher priority, greater than any money, any riches, any stuff. I'm going to give you 5 of them real quickly. One of those is love. and relationships and that connection that we have with people. That's one of the things that Proverbs tells us is more important than money. Proverbs 15:17. Say it with me. A bowl of vegetables with someone you love is better than steak with someone you hate. Don't you love just the practical wisdom of Proverbs? You know, we look at that and what a great saying right there. Absolutely true, isn't it? I mean, being with someone you love and doing without some of the comforts of life, but being with people you love, so much better than enjoying all the good things of life, but not having that loving relationship. So love is one of those things. Character is one of those things. The Bible tells us character more important than money. Say Proverbs 16:8 with me. It says, better to have little with godliness than to be rich and dishonest. Now, I know lots of people that would be okay with being rich. If they had to be a little dishonest, that would be okay with them. But God's Word tells us better to do without. Better to have little than to do it in a way that is ungodly. Love, character, the Bible tells us wisdom. It is more important that you have wisdom than money. Say Proverbs 16:16 with me. How much better to get wisdom than gold, and good judgment than silver. Wisdom, good judgment, so much better than even having silver and gold and money and all those things. There's another one. The Bible talks about peace. So much better to have peace in life than money. Proverbs 17:1. Better a dry crust eaten in peace than a house filled with feasting and conflict. Now, maybe that describes your house, I don't know, at the holidays, and you're thinking, I could just do without that most of the time. But generally, you understand that, don't you? That's a great nugget of wisdom there, that it's better to have peace than to have all the food and all the niceties. It's so much more important. One more thing, a good reputation. A good reputation is better than all the money in the world. Proverbs 22:1, say it. Choose a good reputation over great riches. Being held in high esteem is better than silver or gold. You know, young people, as you're looking through and making plans for the future, there are lots of things that our world tells you to pursue. Get a good job where you can buy a lot of stuff and where you can really get ahead. And I'm hoping this morning you're listening to what this book of Proverbs tells us, that says there are things that are so much more important than money. So, in what is your trust? What is it that you trust in? Proverbs tells us, be careful about putting your trust in money. Proverbs 11:28, say it with me, trust in your money, and what? What? Down you go. Trust in your money, and down you go. It's not worthy of your trust for this very reason right here, Proverbs 23:5. In the blink of an eye, wealth disappears, for it will sprout wings and fly away like an eagle. How many of you have had some money, and it sprouted wings, and you have never seen it again? Anybody? Absolutely. You're like, where did all that money go? I just got paid. Or maybe you had some success in life at one point. Maybe like my wife's father, who was an oil man back in the good old days, and they had plenty, and then all of a sudden we had the oil bust, and man, their money sprouted wings and it flew away. I mean, that's what happens. You cannot trust in money, because in the blink of an eye, it will disappear. And so Proverbs says this is what we need to put our trust in. On the other hand, this is what we do. Proverbs 28:25 says, trusting the Lord leads to prosperity. Now, let me just remind you again, we're talking about general truths here. That is not a promise that if you trust God, you're going to be rich. But generally, if you will put your trust in God and follow God's wisdom, you are going to be on a path that will lead you in the direction of that. That when you follow God's wisdom, there is a much greater chance of you doing well than not following God. See, one of the ways that we acknowledge God, and we do it on a regular basis at our church, is we take up an offering. And part of what we do is not just to pay the bills of a church, not just to provide for those needs. I mean, we understand those are all practical kinds of things, but it goes way deeper than that. Part of the reason why we even pass an offering plate is because we recognize that when we trust God, there is a responsibility that we give to God of the money that He's basically entrusted us with. That when we give to God, we are honoring God. When we put money in the offering plate, it's a statement of saying, God, I trust you to provide for me. God, I'm going to take some of the first of what I've made, and I'm going to give it back to you, and I'm going to just trust that you're going to be able to take care of my needs after I do that. That's a part of what we do when we give an offering. It is a part of our worship service. It's not just something that we tack on to the end of it. It's a part of our worship to God, and it comes from Proverbs. In fact, I want you to say Proverbs 3, 9 to 10 with me. It says, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything that you produce. Then He will fill your barns with grain, and your vats will overflow with good wine. The provision here comes after we honor God first. See, it's a trust issue. And if you want to show God that you trust His wisdom in finances, one of the first things that you do is you honor God with the first and the best. And so really, I could tell if you would open up things to me, I would be able to tell, do you really trust God? Because those that trust God, the first check that's written, the first expense that's rendered, the first thing that comes out of their paycheck is something that says to God, God, I'm going to honor you, and I'm going to extend my trust to you. We're going to talk a little bit more about what specifically that trust in God's wisdom when it comes to finances mean, but here's what it doesn't mean. Trusting God with their finances, some people think that means, well, I just spend all my money, and when it's gone, I trust God to provide till I get some more. Okay? That's not what we're talking about. To some people, trusting God's wisdom in your finances means that I have to give it all to God, and I don't do anything with it. I have to give it all away. And that's not what we're talking about. God gives us some clear wisdom in this. And in fact, for some of you today, I'm not even asking you to trust God with your money yet. What I'm asking is that you would explore what God has to say about it, and that you would just check it out, see if it doesn't ring true. Check out God's wisdom on this and see if it doesn't really work. And here's the reason why I think we don't trust God's wisdom on our finances is because most of God's wisdom goes completely against our nature. It goes against conventional wisdom. It goes against what we're taught. It goes against the messages that we're bombarded with. It goes against our nature. And the truth is that for some of you, had you followed God's wisdom all along in your life, had you listened and followed God's wisdom, you wouldn't be in the situation that you're in right now. You wouldn't be experiencing the debt load that you've got right now. You wouldn't have the stress and anxiety that you have over finances right now. You would be able to be more generous like you want to be, but you just can't seem to get in a position to do that. Had you listened and followed God's wisdom, you wouldn't be in the painful situation you're in right now. And young people, I want to remind you again, if you're listening with me, if you're tracking along with me today, you've got an opportunity right here to start some healthy habits that if you'll listen to this, if you'll listen and follow God's wisdom on finances, you will save yourself a lot of pain. So what does Proverbs have to say about it? Talk about 4 things here real quickly. Trusting God's wisdom on finances, we do it by choosing generosity instead of greed. By choosing generosity instead of greed. See, God's wisdom says to be generous, to give it away. Conventional wisdom says, be stingy with it, hoard it, get all you can for yourself, and the more that you can amass for yourself, the better off that you'll be. God's wisdom, completely opposite of that. Give it away, and somehow or another, it'll come back to you. Doesn't make sense. We don't understand how it works. But we do know this, that having money is not a bad thing. It can be a useful tool. But not knowing why you have money is a bad thing. And we're told that we have been blessed and that we've been given so that we can be generous to other people. That's one of the reasons why you and I have as much as we do, why we're blessed to live in the culture that we are, is because God placed it and gave it to us so that we could be managers and stewards of it and be generous. We were created in the image of God. God is generous. He wants us to be generous. And so we understand this thing that really doesn't make sense that Proverbs tells us, is that we need to be generous instead of keeping it, instead of being greedy, instead of hoarding it for ourselves. Proverbs 11:24, say it with me. Give freely and become more wealthy. Be stingy and lose everything. Wow. That really goes against every common sense thing that we understand, doesn't it? Be free with your money and you'll get more of it. Be stingy and you're going to lose everything. In fact, read this next verse with me, Proverbs 11:25. The generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will be themselves refreshed. When you are generous, there is something about this that means somehow God and somehow the universe is going to work where you're going to be refreshed as well. In fact, one more, I want you to read Proverbs 19:17 with me. If you help the poor, you are lending to the Lord, and He will repay you. If you are generous to somebody, you're not just being nice. You're not just being good to them. Proverbs says that when you are generous to people, it's like you're giving God a loan. And do you think God has the ability to repay that loan? Absolutely. When you're generous, you are loaning money to God. Now again, it goes against every natural inclination that we have because we are natural born takers. That we get that part. But one of the most challenging questions concerning the way that we manage our resources is this: do I really trust God that if I give something away, He is capable of resupplying me? Proverbs says yes. Be generous instead of being greedy. Here's the second thing on God's wisdom. Trust God's wisdom on finances and do it this way: by showing restraint over self-indulgence. One of the ways that we trust God is that we demonstrate some level of restraint when it comes to our finances over just self-indulgence, over just doing whatever we want. Again now, human nature is that we would spend whatever we have and more. That's what we're being told now, that most of us spend 100% plus of what we make through the use of credit. But human nature is that if we've got it, let's spend it. If there's money in the account, then I guess I have money to spend. If I qualify for that size of loan, then, well, I must need that much money, and I must need that big a house. If it's available to me, then that's what I need to do. And so we are absent of any kind of restraint, and Proverbs tells us otherwise. That we need to be cautious, that we can show restraint over just indulging ourselves. And it means that we get to the point where I can say, enough. I'm content. I've got enough with what I have. And I don't know if you've ever asked yourself that question, but how much is enough? If you just kept getting more money, at what point would you say, Okay, I've got a big enough house and I've got enough stuff in it where I don't need any more, and even if I get any more, I'm not going to just keep, upgrading. I'm not just going to keep acquiring. And again, Proverbs right here, very countercultural, says don't keep spending, don't squander your money, but show some restraint. We read part of this Proverbs 10:16 passage, but let's talk about the rest of it. Read it with me. The earnings of the godly enhance their lives, but evil people squander their money on sin. You know anybody that's done that? You ever done that? Spent your money and you thought, man, that was foolish. Why did I spend my money on that? Or maybe you've squandered in it. Maybe it hasn't been on something sinful, but you recognize that you just wasted a whole lot of money. The godly people choose to use it to enhance their lives. The ungodly or the foolish waste it. They indulge themselves. They show no restraint. Read Proverbs 21:17 with me. Those who love pleasure become poor. Those who love wine and luxury will never be rich. In other words, those that just keep having to have more and more and more amenities and luxuries, they're never going to get anywhere. They're going to spend all their money. In fact, Proverbs 21:20 makes it very clear. Say this one with me. The wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get. Fools spend whatever they get. Got any money left over in your checking account at this point in the month? Or are you a fool that spends every bit of it? Every time you get a paycheck, it's all gone. Be careful. Show restraint. Trust God by saying, I'm not going to spend everything that I get, but I'm going to say no on occasion. Here's a third area we trust God. Trust God's wisdom and finances by working hard instead of expecting something for nothing. Now, we're going to talk about how this relates to this idea of finances. But again, remember, we're talking about things that go against conventional wisdom. Being generous instead of greedy. Showing restraint instead of just indulging yourself. Working hard now instead of going, it'll happen. Somebody owes it to me. Conventional wisdom tells us this. You find a job that pays the most possible for the least amount of effort that you put out. Find the easy road. Find the easy way. Better yet, if you don't have to work, that's even better. If you can get money without working, conventional wisdom says that's a great way to do it right there. And so that's why casinos and gambling is such a big deal for us, is because it's this idea of I can get something for nothing. What a great thing. I don't have to work for it. I can win the lottery, I can win the slots, I can play the cards, I can do whatever. Or, maybe we don't do that, but if I could just find the perfect opportunity, or if I could find that great deal, or there is this neat new situation where you can make a lot of money, and I'll be set for life. And Proverbs says something else. In fact, Proverbs offers a lot of caution against any of those kinds of statements right there. And most of it has to do with this idea of not being lazy, but understanding that true financial success has had some hard work behind it. Okay? Read Proverbs 10:4 with me. Lazy people are soon poor, hard workers get rich. Now again, we're talking general truths right here. You probably know some hard workers that have not ever gotten rich. But generally, that is true. People who get busy, who get the work done, they are people that prosper and get paid for it. Proverbs 13:4, say it with me. Lazy people want much, but get little. But those who work hard will prosper. This is the idea that hard workers get rich, that lazy people are going to get poor. We need to have some hard work ethics. Our society is a lazy one. It's one that says you can have everything and you don't have to work for it. Win the lottery, get rich, gamble, find some way where you can get more and more. And our culture is in love with getting something for nothing. In fact, just throw out the word free and people go crazy. We like free stuff, something for nothing. We like free lunches. And unfortunately, our government has catered to that, and we have lots of people now that think that the government or someone out there ought to take care of me. We call it entitlement. And there are people who think, and now for generations have thought, that I ought to get something for nothing. Now, there are truly people that deserve help and need that, and we're not going to get into all of that. I'm just saying, making a statement about the culture in which you and I live is one that says, someone owes me. And I would suggest that that's not just people that live in some big city somewhere, that filters in for all of us, that somebody ought to give us something, that we deserve it, that we have a right to that, and we need to be cautious. Proverbs warns us about that. It warns us against getting something for nothing. In fact, Proverbs 28:20, say this one with me, the trustworthy person will get a rich reward, but a person who wants quick riches will get into trouble. Be careful, it says. And in fact, that's why Proverbs even makes a very specific caution to young people or to people who might be leaving an inheritance to a young person. In fact, just read this verse with me, Proverbs 20:21. An inheritance obtained too early in life is not a blessing in the end. Why would that be? Well, for those of you that have some maturity on you, you can think back, and if you were 16 or if you were 20 or if you were 26, it doesn't make any difference. Would you make different decisions with finances than you did back then? I hope so. We recognize that sometimes you can have more money than you can have sense to deal with it. And so even Solomon here warns about leaving an inheritance that in our culture people would say, well, I have a right to that. That's my money. Proverbs warns us that leaving that to somebody at too early of an age doesn't become a blessing in the end. My wife and I just finished putting together a will and setting up a trust and dealing with some of those final estate matters like that. And that's one of the questions that we had to address. If something unfortunately were to happen to one of us or both of us, then at what point would we want that to be passed on to our kids? And we opted to say later. We want to put that off till a later age where they have some maturity to be able to deal with that kind of money. Trust God's wisdom by working hard instead of expecting something for nothing. One last thing. Let's talk about this and we'll wrap it up. We need to trust God's wisdom by planning ahead instead of acting impulsively. Proverbs tells us that there is a part of our finances that requires some planning. And I know some of you aren't natural planners. That's more difficult for you to do. But there are ways of getting people to help you to do that. It is countercultural, though, to what our society tells us. The message that we get today is that we need to go ahead and buy now. You can pay later. Don't wait. Just get it. You deserve it. And by the way, it's on sale, so you need to do it right now, and you'll save a lot of money. And the Bible tells us that we are stewards, that we're managers, and that implies that we are planners. Say Proverbs 21:5 with me. Good planning and hard work lead to prosperity. There is a sense of planning that is necessary for us to do well financially. It means that you set some priorities. It means these are some things that are more important, and these are the things that have to be that have to be paid first, and this is some goals that we have in life, and this is the direction that we're headed. In fact, an interesting Proverbs 24:27, say this one, do your planning and prepare your fields before building your house. Do your planning and prepare your fields before building your house. In other words, make sure that you have a way of being able to support yourself and pay for the items that you're going to purchase long before you do it. Unfortunately, we live in a society right now that says, well, make sure you can find the lifestyle that you want and go after the lifestyle that you want, and then try and find a way to support that. And it's like putting the cart in front of the horse. And Proverbs says, make sure you get the priority straight. Make sure you get it in the right order. You get the fields together. You get all that planned, and then you'll be able to decide what it is that you're able to afford and what kind of lifestyle that you can have. You do those things. And here's the crazy thing about it. I talk with people all the time who have plans and strategies and are very intentional about their careers. And I talk with people all the time about how intentional they are about their parenting. And I know people who go into great detail and are very intentional about the hobbies and the spare time kinds of things that they do. But when it comes to managing God's money, it's like they feel absolutely powerless. It's like everything's out of their control, and there's nothing I can do about this. It's just the state that I'm in, and I don't know what to do about it. And you can work on it. You can plan. You can figure out some things. In fact, Proverbs 27:23 says this: know the state of your flocks. Well, most of us here don't have any flocks in the field, but the principle's still true. Know where you stand with your money, with your finances, with your financial picture. Know where things are so that you can plan it. And what I find is that most people have no idea even how much money they spend. Well, I spend my paycheck. That's what we spend. Most people have no idea, are completely clueless with how much money they go through. And so one of the things that I just put in the bulletin for you today, and maybe a point of application, a point of action for you to take, if I'm describing you, and I know there are many of you that have a great plan and you're working along, in your bulletin today is a 30-day diary, and all it is a thing for you to keep track of how much money you spend. Now, keep track of everything, write everything down. You stop at Quick Trip and get, that 59-cent 32-ounce thing that's a great deal. You keep track of every one of those. Every time you stop at Starbucks, every dime you spend. And if I'm describing you, let me challenge you to just try this so that you can find out the state of your flocks. You can find out how much money you're spending. You can keep track, and my guess is that you'll be surprised at how much that is. You see, when we plan, it helps us to prepare for the future. It helps us to be disciplined to save. Read this Proverbs 13:11 with me. Wealth from get-rich-quick schemes quickly disappears. Wealth from hard work grows over time. I like the New International Version. It says, he who gathers money little by little makes it grow. That's what we do when we save. We put a little at a time, and it grows. And so planning helps us to be able to do that, to be able to save. Planning also helps guard us from the danger of debt. Proverbs warns us, cautions us about debt, that it causes friction, that it causes problems, it can cause stress. Sometimes there's shame over the lack of discipline. Sometimes we feel guilty over our inability to be able to give more and to be more generous because we are in so much debt. And Proverbs gives us that wisdom. Proverbs 22:7, say it with me. Just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender. Now, no place in the Bible does it say don't be in debt. But it does caution us about debt. when you are in debt, you become a servant. You are tied to someone else, and so be careful. Trust God's wisdom in your finances. That means you choose generosity over greed. It means you choose restraint over self-indulgence. It means that you choose hard work over just getting something for nothing. It means you choose planning over just acting impulsively. And can I get you just to dream with me for a minute? What if every person in our church said, we're going to trust God's wisdom when it comes to this area of finances? If no one else but every person in our church did that, can you imagine some of the things that would take place? You know, can you think just of some of the maybe personal blessings for you of being able to have that control over that area of your life? Can you imagine the resources that would be available for us to do some ministry initiatives and to, start some things and to reach out to people maybe that we just never have because the funds aren't there? Can you imagine the hundreds and maybe thousands of people who would be helped and blessed because we would be generous? We would just have money available to us, and we would have the attitude that would say we would want to give. Can you imagine how our community would be impacted by that? And how maybe the missionaries that we support in other countries, how they would suddenly be impacted by that? Just because some people said, God, we're going to trust you in this area. One last verse I want you to read with me, Proverbs 30. Kind of gives us the right attitude in this thing. Proverbs 30, verse 8 and 9. It says, give me neither poverty nor riches. Give me just enough to satisfy my needs. For if I grow rich, I may deny you and say, who is the Lord? It goes on to say, if I'm poor, I may have to steal. Give me just enough, God, to satisfy my need, and so I can keep trusting in you. Would you pray with me? Father, we thank you for giving us what we need. And Father, in most cases of people and families represented in this world, in this room right here, thank you for giving us much, much more than we need. And God, I'm praying that we would just trust you, that we would trust your wisdom when it comes to our finances, and that we would follow you and what you say. Praying it in Jesus' name. Amen. All the